Though history sometimes seems definitive, behind the scenes, amongst those that look deep into it, they come across statements in the past that raise questions that have gone unanswered, especially before World War II, when debate was welcomed and the worry of ridicule about what's now a touchy topic wasn't as prevalent as it is today. In the early 1900s, an ancestor of the Yurok tribe of Native Americans, a people that inhabited areas of Oregon and Northern California, authored an amazing book and stated in it that her purpose was to inform of the history of her tribes of Indians of the Clement River Valley. Known by her English name of Lucy Thompson, Shinawa Wichawa, in her 1916 book to the American Indians, reminiscent of a Yurok woman, said she wanted others to understand her people's perspective and was critical of the overuse of land by the colonizing Europeans. In a chapter of her book called The Traditions of the Ancient White People, she wrote of the Wagas, a white people that already lived in the Clement River Valley as her people appeared in America. She said they were recognized as the original possessors of the soil, as they inhabited the whole continent, and they ruled with a beacon of light and kindness, with their morals far superior to the white people of the land today. She said they taught us arts and sciences. There were no wars or quarrels, and there were intermarriages with these ancient people, as they loved us as we loved them, with no difficulties were ever known between our people. She said, abruptly one day, after living with these ancient people for so long, they gathered together and left for a distant land, we know not where, as they went towards the north in which they came. They were loyal friends, and we mourned them leaving. They left monuments and landmarks that we still keep up and repair, as every time an artifact or broken bowl was found of theirs, we remember and mourned their departure. They assured my people they would return one day, and thousands of years have passed, and some of our elders still look for the return of the white man. They handed us down traditions, and the Wagas told us that when they first arrived in America, it was inhabited by giants who hunted giant creatures with axes and spears so large that our people cannot move them, and even the birds and fowl were much larger than today. The gods were displeased with these giants, who were immoral, and destroyed them one day. And even though the Wagas did not tell us how this happened, they said, but this age of giants was no more. The land became inhabited then with smaller versions of these animals, birds, and fowls, in which the Wagas and our people hunted for game. All of the half-breeds left with the Wagas, and those that were three-quarter Indian remained with us, and this is why some of our people have fair skin today. These people settling today, even though they look like the Wagas, they are not the same, as their morals are unlike those who were here before us. In 1967, while excavating a building in Newfoundland, a discovery was found that has been kept quiet for decades. Known as the Curtis site, nearly 100 graves were discovered as part of the maritime archaic peoples throughout parts of Canada and into the American Northeast. These graves were nearly perfect preservation, and many artifacts were found, including shell-beaded clothing and fine needles, which suggested an elaborate and sophisticated people. Each of these burials are notorious for the bodies being covered in red ochre. After the mitochondrial DNA was extracted from the people of these burials, it was discovered that the people had nothing genetically in common with the Inuit who later inhabited the same area. These maritime archaic hunters, equipped with harpoons, appeared in the Americas over 9,000 years ago and lasted to approximately 3,500 BC. The Phoenicians, who I mentioned in a previous video, were a seafaring group of explorers from the Old World. It is known that they visited many lands, and although they did not call themselves the Phoenicians, this is a term that was given to them by the Greeks, and it means people of red or red people. As with the Minoans, they seem to have a practice of applying red ochre to their skins. In 1994, a Mexican archaeologist was performing stabilization work at a temple when she noticed a small crack in the stairs partially covered by masonry and weeds. Using her flashlight, she looked into what was a passageway that had been hidden by the stairs, and she seen it connected to a sealed door. She then notified the team leader, Arnaldo Cruz, and after getting to the door on the second level of the pyramid, they made their way through a couple of corridors and found a stone wall covered with stucco, and made the decision to look through a small hole and see what was inside. What they found was a perfectly intact tomb, and after lifting the lid of the sarcophagus, they found the remains of a woman lying on her back, and the skeleton was covered in jade and pearl objects and other artifacts, all encased in a red dust called cinnabar, which is the ground ore from which we extract mercury. The skeleton became known as the Red Mayan Queen, and although dated to 700 AD, could this burial practice of the Maya been adopted from their findings after visiting and excavating the lands of their ancient neighbors to the south, known as the Olmec? At the same time as the Phoenicians were making their voyages of the seas, another mysterious culture existed to the east and was flourishing. When the British had possession of India, and while doing construction on a railway in what is now modern-day Pakistan and West India, a civilization that was not known of in the historical record was unearthed. This very advanced civilization had their own language, and their writings today are known as the Indus Valley script. A city unearthed here, Mohenjo-Daro, appears to have suffered some cataclysmic end, as the individuals from this mysterious civilization were found dead lying in the streets, along with several more anomalies. They seem to have just disappeared after a very destructive demise. New Zealand was first discovered by the Dutch in 1642, and modern-day academia, which has an anti-Western agenda, and in my opinion, they are trying to cover up something about European ancestors which they can't have known to the public. They say the Polynesians first discovered the island over 3,000 years ago. They pushed this narrative despite many of the Polynesians themselves suggesting otherwise. It has always been a mystery to historians, despite an answer staring them in the face, how the sweet potato managed to make its way from South America, not only to Easter Island, but to New Zealand itself. The sweet potato, or kumara, has a god associated with it in both places as well. The Maori, who are the original inhabitants of New Zealand, have stories and traditions of encountering a group of white-skinned people in New Zealand with red hair, and being a common trait amongst these people. They even have a name for them, the Waitaha. The Waitaha have many songs and chants numbering in the thousands that tell a much different story than what the standard model suggests. Their story is that more than 77 generations ago, they left a very hot land near India due to a catastrophic war breaking out. A very large group of them then traveled to Egypt first, and the Pharaoh sent along a master navigator to explore and map the unknown world. They sailed the Atlantic and landed in a very thin land strip, which today is the Isthmus of Panama, and then traveled south to a continent where Peru is today. Now, while it's not very well known, Caucasian features, such as red or blonde hair, green or blue eyes, appear in some of the peoples of Peru, such as with the Clau people, the Arakaru people, the Chachapoa people, and even the red hair of the Paracas skulls well before modern contact by Europeans. They lived peacefully in Peru, but after a few generations, they were then exiled once again and set sail to the east. They landed on a triangle-shaped island that we call today Easter Island. They brought with them their language, writings, and culture and settled in once again. But if it already wasn't obvious enough, just as in with Peru, these peaceful people were eventually exiled once again. When they landed in the northeastern part of New Zealand, where the name Waitaha is still in use today, they were eventually contacted by a group of peoples who were already living on the island, and this group was not the Maori. This is Monica Matanui Kui, and some of her children and grandchildren, who, as you can clearly see, possess Caucasian features. While this is commonly thought to be a byproduct of interbreeding between the colonists in New Zealand and the native Maori, Monica's DNA, as well as her people's thousands of songs and chants, say otherwise. In 2006, at a government hearing, and listening to so-called historians saying incorrect statements about her people, the Ngata Hatua tribe of Waitaha, that it had been wiped out long ago, she decided to speak up. And after her story got traction online, the Geographical Society, as part of the Geographic Project, sequenced her DNA. And it showed for not only was her DNA closely related to Peruvian and Easter Islanders, but also related to the ancient Egyptians, and more importantly, the mysterious civilization of the Indus Valley. This is concrete evidence of her and her people's stories being history instead of fairy tale and myth. Even though this is a nice ending to the story, one loop has yet to be closed. Remember, her people spoke of people living in New Zealand when they arrived there. Both the Maori and the Waiatua people, through centuries of intermarriage, the descendants today have stories that are handed down from long ago. The story goes that when Kopai landed in New Zealand, it was already inhabited by a race of white or fair-skinned people with red hair and green or blue eyes being a prevalent trait. They called them the Kura Maeho. Today there is hardly no evidence of these red-haired people amongst the Polynesian descendants of the Pacific Islands, yet there are legends and actual documented accounts from early explorers. Like in 1776, Captain Wallace of the HMS Dolphin, when he first visited Tahiti, over 10% of the population had white skin and golden or red hair. It was observed that the chief of every island had a white-skinned, red-haired woman as his wife, and that this trait was highly sought after. It was noted that many existed with the natives on the islands of Huahine, which means the Feast of Woman, or Waitaha, which is the original meaning meant the white people of Ra. Years later, when these islands were revisited, these white-skinned people had all vanished, and explorers were told that soon after the initial explorers visited and left, these Caucasian-looking people all took sick and died. This suggests they were not immune to European diseases, and thus weren't of modern European descent, and that they had traveled to these islands many thousands of years ago. The Samoans still venerate and honor these ancient red-haired ancestors still today in ceremonies, yet academia wants these ancient Caucasian peoples erased from or not known to the populace of today. Could it be because these mysterious people are evidence to something that was once taken serious by scholars, but since World War II has been smeared at consistently to the point its mention is ridiculed? The Indus Valley script is identical to that of the writings of the inhabitants of Easter Island. The sweet potato is grown in Peru, and the name for it is kumar. In New Zealand and throughout the Pacific Islands, it is known as kumara. Does this really look like a coincidence, as academia would leave us to believe? Or is it possible that a cataclysmic war in the Indus Valley, which has been written about not only in the Rig Vedas, but as part of the stories and chants from the Waitaha people of New Zealand, along with the remains of Mohenjo-Daro uncovered by the British, are we to believe that this is also coincidence? Here we have two separate, very ancient civilizations. Both have writings and accounts of a cataclysmic war over 5,000 years ago, which also just happens to be the time that the Egyptian Old Kingdom appears out of nowhere. Now remember, part of the story is that the Pharaoh sent along a navigator with this party of Waitaha people from the Indus Valley to survey and map the world. And who were those fair-skinned, red-haired, golden-haired people that inhabited the Pacific Islands and also New Zealand when both the Waitaha people and the Maori both arrived? And this is the same time the mysterious maritime archaic people vanished from North America. All I'm asking is, could all these people and all these similar events just somehow be related? And looking into these events, all with striking similarities and documentation, Shouldn't that be the scholarly approach? Charles Hapgood tried to triangulate the projection point of a map that was discovered hidden in the Library of Congress and from the 1500s, known as the Pierre-Reese map. After triangulation, he came to the conclusion that the map's projection point was most likely from Egypt. And calculating the sea level rise, he came to the conclusion it was drawn around 3761 BC. This just so happens to be the year in which the Hebrew calendar begins. The Hebrew, who are the descendants of the Phoenicians. My name is MJ. Thank you for listening.